Hello and welcome to Shift from Berlin Wharfdale Methodist Church. In this series of 5 sessions, which brings to a close 2020, a year where the world came together by staying apart, we're taking a look at topics that appear to present opposites. Staying informed but keeping calm, staying alert but keeping relaxed, staying apart but keeping connected, staying covered but keeping your identity, staying home but keeping festive. So let's explore staying apart, keeping together. Welcome to Shift from Berlin Wharfdale Methodist Church. Do you suffer from isolation or feelings of disconnectedness? What are your lifelines in this time of keeping apart? Well, let's hear from Jan, who has some thoughts on staying apart but keeping together.
Whoever would have thought a year ago that you would now be sitting in your own home in lockdown for the second time, watching Shift online, instead of sharing a delicious breakfast together in the company of friends and family, chatting together, singing and sharing thoughts and ideas about a range of contemporary issues which affect us all. But here we are, isolated and apart in so many ways from those we love and care about so much. In most cases, 2 metres apart from the rest of the world. We are essentially a social species, and recent studies have highlighted the huge importance of contact with others, both for our general well-being, but more specifically for our mental health. And this is fast becoming a very real problem in society. According to Age UK, even before the pandemic began to take hold, over 1 million people said they go more than a month without speaking to a friend, neighbour or family member. What a terribly sad thought that is. Loneliness is defined as a feeling of disconnectedness or isolation, and it can drive up cortisol levels in the body. This can lead to inflammation, excess weight gain, insulin resistance and problems concentrating. So how then, in this new world that we're living in, where we're being kept apart from each other in so many ways, can we stay connected and together in meaningful and positive ways? Well, of course, several months now into the pandemic, I don't think there can be many people left in the world who haven't heard of or used Zoom or other online platforms such as Meet or Teams. For many people, Zoom's been an absolute lifeline, a means of regular contact with family and friends, work colleagues. And often old friends have been reconnected after years of merely exchanging a yearly Christmas card containing little more information than, certainly in our case, Happy Christmas, love from Jan and Adrian. But I wonder if any of you, like me, are becoming a little zoomed out. Our daughter, who lives on her own in a flat in London, said to me the other day, "I'm just so sick of looking at a screen." Maybe she was fed up of looking at me, but seriously, as her mum, my heart went out to her, and like many of you must feel, I just wanted to give her a big hug, to give her some love she could actually feel rather than see. So how do we make our online conversations as meaningful and positive as possible? In preparing this talk, I came across some thoughts by a lady called Priya Parker, entitled The Art of Gathering. She talks of how we don't necessarily need to get together more online, we need to get together better. Often our Zoom meetings can be a bit vague, and maybe for the sake of it, just a weekly catch-up, when really many of us perhaps haven't got much that's new to report or interesting. We need to ask ourselves, what's the need of the Zoom meeting? This was brought home to me in a weekly Zoom chat with some friends I've known for about 30 years. One of them, we'll call her Jane, lost her husband about 5 years ago. She sat through the meeting particularly quiet that evening. When one of the other girls started to talk about a recent funeral she'd been to, Jane looked as if she was about to cry, and none of us, I'm ashamed to say, really tackled what was her need that day. It was to stop talking about the trivia of our own circumstances and offer her a listening ear and the compassion that she obviously so needed that evening. So how can we get a sense of the feeling or energy in the room when we're physically apart? To make our online time together more engaging and sometimes more fun, Priya Parker suggests giving the group a name or asking people to bring a physical object, a bit like show and tell, or maybe bring a favourite song to share. One idea might be to ask everyone to wear a funny costume or make the same recipe together while you're on the Zoom call. Though screens don't quite replace the energy of in-person gatherings, we can still strengthen community bonds by reminding ourselves that there are real people on the other end of our devices. We need to remember that we're both hosts and guests in online meetings, so we should try to avoid going onto autopilot. Whilst the pandemic has physically isolated many of us from each other, our human ingenuity and resilience means that we can still build community together. Across the world, people are gathering in new and imaginative ways to set up caremongering support groups, and so can we. We also need to allow ourselves time to reflect on the unknown. It's important to acknowledge that this is not a normal time. The coronavirus pandemic has transformed the world, and as a global society, we'll experience the reverberations of this period as they ripple across every sector of human life. We need to create space for those conversations too. We need to talk about how we are being changed, individually and collectively, by this shared experience. It's perfectly normal to feel worried and vulnerable, and even though we're physically apart, this may be a good time to talk together about those feelings and think about what really matters to us. But how can we stay connected with folks who don't have an internet connection? Many people are now realising the value of sending and receiving good old-fashioned letters or regular phone calls. I volunteer normally for Ilkley Good Neighbours as a befriender, and since March I've been unable to visit the elderly lady that I used to see once a week. At the moment, the restrictions mean that I can only phone her. But that weekly call means so much to her and to me. So much so that at 3 o'clock every Thursday, I know that she's waiting by the phone, as it only ever rings once before she snatches up the receiver and I hear her say, "Oh, Jan, hello." So how about those who've been actually forced together during lockdown? As we know, many young people have recently been thrust into isolation together in recent weeks at university, many of them living away from home for the first time. In such a situation, it's really important to establish ground rules, as I'm sure many of them have. For example, thinking about the use of physical space, sharing costs and thinking about time spent together and apart. Actually planning to be apart for some of the time is important too. All these things help to maintain positive relationships. As we know, lockdown earlier this year seemed to create a real sense of communities pulling together, with neighbours offering to collect shopping and prescriptions for the housebound, or volunteering in food banks, or perhaps walking the dog for someone who was shielding. We all stood on our doorsteps on a Thursday evening and clapped our appreciation for the wonderful NHS workers. I really enjoyed getting involved in a community project in Ilkley, in which a large group of volunteers sewed over 500 sets of scrubs for GPs in the local area. I have to say I only managed 3.5 sets, but it did give me a great sense of fulfilment, being able to do something useful. And I made some new friends too through the project, some of whom I never even realised lived on our own street. Helping others and creating a sense of togetherness and shared purpose whilst we've been apart really has seemed to bring the country together. But should it take a pandemic to bring out such care and compassion? The danger is that as the pandemic drags on, we may lose our willingness to help others and become compassion fatigued. As a Christian, I believe we have a clear calling to help and support those in need at all times, both in the good times and the bad. In the Bible, in the book of Mark, one of the religious leaders asked Jesus, "Of all the commandments, which is the most important?" And Jesus answered, "Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and with all your strength. The second is this: love your neighbour as yourself. There is no commandment greater than these." Wow! If we actually love our neighbours as ourselves, then it would automatically follow that we would not murder, we wouldn't steal, we wouldn't commit adultery, and so on. But who is our neighbour? Is it just those on our own street or in our own neighbourhood? I don't think Jesus meant that. Our neighbours are surely all our fellow human beings. So whilst we can of course help those immediately around us, we can also look more widely and try to help those we don't even know or will never meet. Many of you will have donated items to local food banks or to Paphras. Paphras, if you've not heard of it, is a charity based in Leeds which supports destitute refugees and asylum seekers, and it's supported by our church here in Burley. Nearer to Christmas, Catherine McIntosh Dixon, one of our own church members here, will once again be asking us to fill reverse Advent boxes with food, toiletries and goodies to be distributed to needy families. The response in previous years has been fantastic, and the people of Burley have risen to the challenge with amazing generosity. So in these dark days, while we're so far apart in so many ways, we can come together as we share our love and our hearts with those who really need it. And for me, perhaps in terms of being apart, one of the most amazing promises in the Bible is in the book of Romans. It says, "Neither death nor life, neither angels nor demons, neither the present nor the future, nor any powers, neither height nor depth, nor anything in all creation will be able to separate us from the love of God."